You gather here with me tonight, not merely to hear words, but to stand at the edge of a revelation. You feel it, do you not? The invisible net that encircles humanity, a vast web of images, voices, fragments of lives, an unending stream that we call social media, yet beneath its glittering surface lies a power both unprecedented and perilous. For it touches the deepest layers of the collective unconscious and stirs what has long slept within the shadow of mankind. When I speak of the shadow, I do not mean some distant abstraction. I mean the living, breathing repository of everything we repress, deny, and cast away into the dark recesses of our psyche. It is the other half of our face, the one we hide from the mirror. Now imagine not just one man's shadow, but the shadows of billions woven together in an endless cycle of projection and contagion. This is what the age of social media has conjured: a planetary shadow, shimmering on the screen before you, demanding your attention, feeding on your energy, multiplying through your clicks. Do you see how swiftly we give ourselves away? Each image posted, each phrase typed in haste, each judgment flung into the void. These are not innocent acts. They are psychic offerings, fragments of your unconscious, clothed in digital garments, sent into the marketplace of souls. The ancients cast sacrifices into fire, hoping the gods would answer. You, in this modern ritual, cast sacrifices into the algorithm, hoping the crowd will respond. What you receive in return is not divine fire, but the echo of the collective shadow disguised as approval or condemnation. You long for affirmation, yet you are given mirrors distorted by countless unseen faces. And when you stare too long into such mirrors, you forget the contours of your own being. You become slowly a creature fashioned by shadows, mistaking their noise for your truth. The danger is not merely addiction to images, though that is grave. The danger is possession. Archetypes, once contained by myth and ritual, now roam freely through the networks. The trickster leaps from meme to meme, mocking all that was once sacred. The pure Eternus, the eternal youth, dances endlessly on TikTok, refusing responsibility, floating in the intoxication of perpetual adolescence. The devouring mother cloaks herself in the guise of influencers who demand your allegiance, suffocating individuality with a false intimacy. The warrior archetype, stripped of nobility, appears in torrents of anger, in digital mobs who destroy reputations with a swipe of the hand, and above them all, the shadow itself pulsates, whispering, "I am you," but multiplied 1,000-fold. It is no longer your private shadow that haunts you. It is the collective shadow magnified by the algorithms, drawing you into identification, stripping you of discernment. Consider a dream in which you walk through a crowded city where every window reflects not your face but the faces of strangers wearing masks that shift and laugh and accuse. You search for yourself but cannot find the stable image. This dream is the lived reality of social media. The psyche becomes fragmented. Identity dissolves into avatars, each competing for survival in a theater of shadows. What is forgotten in this masquerade is the self, the deep center that unites conscious and unconscious, that holds the key to wholeness. When you scatter fragments of your personality across platforms, you risk dismembering the very soul that seeks integration, like the god Dionysus torn by the Titans. Your psyche is torn into images and consumed by an unseen hunger. I must warn you, when the shadow is not faced consciously, it erupts unconsciously with destructive force. In the individual, repression breeds neurosis. In the collective, repression breeds hysteria, scapegoating, violence. Social media has become the global stage for such eruptions. Notice how swiftly outrage spreads, how hatred leaps across borders with the speed of light, how suspicion is amplified until it becomes dogma. These are not isolated incidents, they are archetypal storms. The witch hunt has returned, not with torches and gallows, but with hashtags and cancellations. The Roman Colosseum has returned, not with lions and gladiators, but with viral videos and comment sections where the mob demands blood. This is the collective shadow acting itself out, projected onto whomever dares to fall into its gaze. Do not think you are immune because you scroll silently, because you consume without posting. The very act of witnessing charges the field. Psychic energy flows, whether you acknowledge it or not. The unconscious does not care whether you speak or remain silent. It registers the image, the affect, the archetypal pattern. Each encounter adds weight to the invisible atmosphere of your psyche, pressing upon you until your dreams begin to echo the noise of the network. You dream of endless feeds, of faceless crowds, of being pursued by eyes that never close. These are warning signs. The soul cries out, you are drowning in the collective shadow. Turn inward before it is too late. And yet I do not condemn the technology itself. The medium is neutral. It is the use that summons light or darkness. Social media has also given voice to the forgotten, has connected the isolated, has spread knowledge that once lay hidden. But such gifts come with a price. Power without consciousness is always dangerous. The printing press unleashed the Reformation and the Enlightenment, but it also unleashed wars and fanaticism, radio-connected nations, but it also amplified tyrants. Now we stand at another threshold. Social media is the new oracle, and its prophecies are not from the gods, but from the collective unconscious. You must learn to interpret these prophecies, to recognize when the shadow speaks and when the self calls. Without discernment, you will be swept away. Let me ask you, when you post an image of yourself, who is it that you truly show? Is it your essence? Or is it the persona, the mask you wear for others? The persona is necessary, society demands it. But when the persona becomes the totality, when it is inflated by likes and shares, you risk identifying with the mask and forgetting the soul behind it. The danger is not that others deceive you. The danger is that you deceive yourself, believing the curated image to be your true being. This is how the collective shadow infiltrates the individual by seducing you into identification with illusions. And once you are identified, you are possessed. The work of individuation, the great task of life, demands that you withdraw projections and face the shadow within yourself. Yet social media thrives on projection, It invites you to hurl your unowned darkness onto strangers, to demonize, to idolize, to compare. Each time you judge a life by a photo, you are projecting your own hidden longing or resentment. Each time you join a mob, you are swept into a projection that blinds you to your own shadow. Individuation requires courage to see that the evil you condemn in another is also within you. But who dares such work in the glare of the public eye, where confession is mocked and vulnerability is exploited, and so the shadow grows, feeding on cowardice, inflating in secrecy until it bursts forth in collective madness. I tell you this not to frighten but to awaken. The collective shadow cannot be destroyed, but it can be integrated, just as the individual must confront his own darkness. Humanity must learn to confront the darkness it now amplifies through its networks. To deny it is to invite catastrophe. The very algorithms you trust to entertain you are built to exploit the shadow, to feed you what enrages, frightens, excites. They are mirrors that reflect not your conscious will but your unconscious drives. And if you do not know yourself, you will be enslaved by what you do not know. The machines are not the danger. It is the psyche they awaken. Technology has given the shadow a voice louder than ever before. Only a conscious act of responsibility can prevent that voice from becoming a tyrant. Do you feel the weight of this warning? It is not merely theoretical. Already you see divisions hardening, empathy dissolving, communities tearing at the seams. Already you feel within yourself the anxiety of constant comparison, the exhaustion of endless stimulation, the hollow echo after the applause fades. This is the toll of feeding the collective shadow. Your very life force is siphoned, not by demons from another world, but by demons of your own making, dressed in digital skin. The archetypes are alive, and they are hungry. They will not rest until you acknowledge them, until you make peace with them, until you allow them a rightful place in your inner cosmos rather than projecting them onto the world. You may think the danger lies outside, in the cold circuitry of machines, in the manipulation of corporations, in the malice of strangers who hide behind screens. But if you remain at that level of explanation, you remain blind. The true danger lies within, for the network you fear is only a projection of your own psychic web. The invisible strings that pull you through each post and image are not forged by technology alone. They are woven from archetypal longings, from ancient wounds, from the timeless hunger for recognition. What the algorithm amplifies is what has always dwelt within the unconscious. You are not merely scrolling a feed, you are walking in the dream of humanity, where each click awakens an archetype, each swipe tears open another shadow, and dreams, when unexamined, have the power to possess the dreamer. Have you not felt it in your body? The restlessness after an hour lost in endless images, the hollow pit of comparison that opens when you see another's curated happiness, the trembling anxiety of waiting for validation that never comes. These are not trivial moods. They are signals from the unconscious, alarms that warn of possession, for the psyche cannot be deceived without consequence. Every lie you tell yourself, every mask you wear, every projection you cast into the digital ether accrues interest in the shadow, and one day the shadow comes to collect It comes in the form of depression, of rage, of paranoia, of emptiness, and in the collective, it comes as disintegration of trust, as polarization, as the collapse of meaning itself. Do you see now why I call this a final warning? It is not that humanity has not faced shadows before. It always has, but never has it faced them amplified, accelerated, and multiplied across the entire globe in real time. Dreams often reveal truths we cannot face by day. I recall a patient who dreamed of a vast theater where thousands of masks floated in the air, whispering insults and praise in equal measure. He stood naked before them, uncertain which mask was his own. The dream tormented him until he realized it was a mirror of his waking life, of his compulsive need for approval, of his terror of rejection. Do you not see how this dream is now lived by millions at once? Every profile picture is a mask, every comment a whisper, every like a fleeting cheer, but behind it lies the naked soul, terrified of exposure, desperate for belonging, unable to anchor itself in truth. The danger is that the soul begins to fragment, to lose coherence. Without coherence, there can be no individuation. Without individuation, there can be no wholeness, only endless dependency upon the shifting moods of the collective. What then must one do? First, you must dare to see that the shadow is not the enemy, but the unintegrated part of yourself. To see that the outrage you feel toward another is often your own wound calling for attention. To see that the addiction to approval is the hunger of the abandoned child within you. To see that the chaos of the network is the chaos of the unconscious demanding to be recognized. Do not flee from these revelations. To flee is to surrender to the very forces that enslave you. To see is to begin to take back your power, for when you see, you can choose, and choice is the first act of freedom. But choice requires solitude. Do not misunderstand me. Solitude is not isolation. Isolation is the sickness of our age, a loneliness filled with noise. Solitude is communion with the self, a deliberate withdrawal into silence so that you may hear the voice within. How many of you have sat in silence, away from the devices, away from the endless opinions, and listened, truly listened to the stirrings of your soul? Few, I suspect, and yet, without such listening, you cannot discern the voice of the self from the voice of the shadow. You will mistake the loudest signal for the truest one. You will bow before the idol of the collective, believing its judgments to be fate. This is the path of unconsciousness, and it leads only to despair. The self does not shout. It whispers in dreams, in symbols, in synchronicities. It appears in the unexpected image that lingers, in the word that pierces you, in the silence that envelops you when you least expect it. The self calls you to wholeness, but you must be still enough to hear. Social media is designed to drown out this whisper with the roar of the collective. That is why I warn you, make time for silence, for dreams, for the slow unfolding of your inner life. Without it, you will not withstand the tide of the collective shadow. I have spoken often of archetypes, for they are the eternal patterns of the psyche, the gods within us. In the past, they were honored through myth, ritual, and art. Now they erupt unchecked into the digital sphere. Observe how the trickster archetype thrives online, weaving lies, spreading chaos, mocking authority, seducing you into cynicism. Observe how the hero archetype is distorted, where every influencer presents themselves as a savior with secret knowledge, demanding your devotion. Observe how the shadow archetype swells, turning every disagreement into an absolute battle between good and evil, leaving no room for nuance. The danger is not that these archetypes exist, they must exist, but that they are unrecognized. When archetypes are not recognized, they possess, they dictate behavior without your consent, they turn you into their puppet. Recognition is the act that restores balance, that transforms possession into participation. When you say, "This is not me alone, this is the trickster speaking through me," you loosen its grip. When you say, "This hatred I feel is the shadow, my own darkness projected outward," you begin to reclaim your soul. Perhaps you ask, is it possible to use social media without being consumed by it? Yes, but only with consciousness. Approach it as you would approach a dream, not with blind belief, not with dismissal, but with symbolic understanding. Ask yourself, what archetype is at work here? What shadow is being revealed? What projection am I making? In this way, you transform the experience from one of unconscious participation to one of conscious reflection. You no longer drown in the collective shadow. You study it, learn from it, integrate what belongs to you, release what does not. Social media then becomes not a prison but a mirror, a tool for individuation rather than disintegration. But this requires discipline, vigilance, humility. Few will dare it, for it is far easier to lose oneself in the crowd than to confront the mystery of one's own soul. And yet the fate of humanity may depend on whether enough individuals dare this work. For when the collective shadow grows unchecked, history shows us the result: wars, tyrannies, genocides. The 20th century bore witness to such eruptions, and the scars remain upon the earth. Now the collective shadow moves not through armies alone, but through networks, invisible, yet no less dangerous. If humanity does not learn to confront it, the future will be shaped not by conscious will, but by unconscious possession. This is why I say this warning is final. Time grows short, for the pace of acceleration is unlike any the psyche has known. What took centuries to unfold now unfolds in years, in months, in days. The psyche is strained, stretched, threatened with fragmentation. Only the anchor of the self can hold you steady. So I ask you, will you continue to surrender to the shadows of the network, or will you dare to turn inward? Will you let the archetypes possess you, or will you learn to recognize their masks and dance with them consciously? Will you remain fragmented, or will you seek wholeness? The choice is yours, but the consequences extend beyond you. For each act of consciousness ripples through the collective. Each individual who integrates their shadow lightens the burden of the world. Each soul that chooses wholeness becomes a beacon in the storm. Do not underestimate the power of one awakened individual. History has been shaped again and again by the few who dared to confront themselves and, in doing so, transformed the many. Remember, the collective shadow is nothing more than the accumulation of unintegrated individual shadows. If you confront your own, you already weaken the tyranny of the collective. This is not an abstract hope, it is a psychological truth. The unconscious responds to every act of awareness. What is brought into consciousness loses its power to possess. This is the path before you to become conscious in the midst of unconsciousness, to become whole in the midst of fragmentation, to become a self in the midst of masks. When I speak of the shadow, I do not mean a monster to be slain, but a brother long neglected, a sister cast out of the house of your consciousness. The shadow is not the devil lurking outside you, it is your own unacknowledged truth, twisted by repression, waiting to be recognized. And in the realm of social media, the shadow finds a stage vast beyond measure, where every unowned fragment of psyche is magnified and reflected back 1,000 times. If you deny your envy, you will see it paraded before you in endless images of others' success. If you repress your aggression, you will find it mirrored in the torrents of hatred that flow through comment sections. If you refuse to face your loneliness, you will drown in curated illusions of intimacy. What is not faced within becomes a spectacle without. This is the law of projection, and nowhere has it been enacted with such scale as in the digital sphere. Let me tell you of a dream, for dreams remain our most faithful teachers. A woman once recounted that she stood inside a mirror-lined hall where every reflection showed her with slight distortions, one taller, one grotesque, one beautiful, one monstrous. She wandered frantically, seeking the true self, yet each reflection seduced her into identification. Finally, she screamed, shattering all the mirrors, only to find herself alone in darkness. Do you see? This is the condition of the psyche in the age of social media. You wander through reflections, none entirely true, each demanding your identification, and when at last you realize the futility, you feel only the abyss of emptiness. Unless you anchor yourself in the self, the mirrors will dictate your reality. The self does not arise from comparison, nor from applause. It is born from integration, from the reconciliation of opposites, from the union of conscious and unconscious. But the digital culture feeds only polarity. It teaches you to choose sides, to declare allegiance, to demonize the other. In such an atmosphere, the work of individuation becomes nearly impossible, for individuation requires you to hold tension, to withstand ambiguity, to dwell in paradox until a new synthesis emerges. Yet, on the network, paradox is despised, ambiguity is mocked, tension is unbearable, everything must be reduced to extremes. And so the collective shadow swells because what is nuanced, complex, or subtle is exiled, and the exiled always returns with vengeance. I must tell you, the psyche cannot be deceived forever. When you deny the shadow, it enters your dreams. When you deny it still, it erupts in your relationships. When you deny it further, it manifests in society as conflict, tyranny, destruction. Already you see these eruptions, friendships torn apart by politics, amplified online, Families divided by conspiracy theories, born in digital echo chambers, nations polarized into hostile camps fed by algorithms. These are not coincidences, they are archetypal consequences. The psyche demands wholeness. If wholeness is refused, it imposes itself through suffering. Thus, the suffering you see in the world is not random, it is the voice of the self crying for recognition. Synchronicity, too, becomes corrupted in this age. Once, synchronicities came as subtle alignments, moments of a causal meaning, dreams that mirrored reality, encounters that revealed destiny. Now the algorithms mimic synchronicity, offering you content eerily aligned with your private thoughts. You feel astonished, as if fate itself were speaking, but beware. The machine imitates the mystery, and imitation can become possession if you forget the difference. True synchronicity emerges from the self, from the archetypal order that underlies existence. False synchronicity emerges from the manipulation of data. To confuse the two is to surrender your soul to an idol. Therefore, you must cultivate discernment. Ask yourself, does this alignment lead me deeper into myself? Or does it addict me to the external? Does it open my spirit? Or does it narrow my mind? This is the test of meaning. Let us not forget the archetype of the trickster, for he is at play in every corner of the digital realm. The trickster thrives in ambiguity, in half-truths, in the inversion of values. Her delights in disinformation, in the viral spread of falsehood, in the ridicule of the sacred. He seduces you into believing nothing is real, that everything is entertainment, that sincerity is weakness, and yet the trickster is not merely evil. He serves a purpose. He shatters complacency. He reveals hypocrisy. He forces you to confront what you would rather ignore. If you can recognize the trickster, you may learn from him. But if you remain unconscious, you become his victim, trapped in endless irony, incapable of belief, paralyzed by cynicism. And the society that cannot believe, that cannot hold sacred values, is a society doomed to collapse into nihilism. What then is required? A return to the inner world. Dreams must be honored again. Symbols must be studied, not dismissed as irrelevant. Rituals of silence, of reflection, of community rooted in presence must be restored. Without such anchors, the psyche will be carried away by the flood of collective shadows. This is not a call to abandon technology, but to balance it with soul. Just as the alchemist balanced fire with water, so must you balance the fire of the network with the water of the unconscious. Without this balance, you risk being consumed. Do not imagine this work to be easy. To face your shadow is to face what you most fear in yourself. It is to see the envy, the rage, the lust, the weakness, the despair, and to say, yes, this too is mine. To integrate is to embrace contradiction, to hold both light and dark without denial. Few will attempt it, fewer still will persevere. But those who do become whole, and their wholeness radiates into the world, they become not victims of the collective shadow, but healers of it. They embody the self, and through them, the world remembers its center. Perhaps you are called to be one of them. Perhaps this is why you hear my words tonight, why you feel their resonance in your bones. The self calls each of us in ways we can hardly articulate. To ignore that call is to wither, to answer is to be reborn. Imagine, then, a future where enough individuals have faced their shadows. Social media would still exist, but its power to possess would be weakened. Outrage would not spread unchecked, for conscious individuals would see their own projections before joining the mob. Comparison would not enslave, for each would know their own worth. The trickster would still jest, but his lies would be recognized as riddles, not revelations. This future is possible, but only if you choose the path of individuation. And the path begins now, in the small choices, to reflect before reacting, to turn inward before projecting, to seek the self before surrendering to the crowd. You must understand the collective shadow is not destiny. It is opportunity. It is the crucible in which humanity may either destroy itself or awaken to a higher consciousness. Never before has the unconscious been so visible, so accessible, so undeniable. The network has made the shadow plain for all to see. The question is whether you will take responsibility for what you see, or whether you will continue to deny it until it consumes you. This is why I call it a final warning, because the time for denial has ended. The shadow stands before you, not as a faint whisper, but as a deafening roar. You must choose how to respond. You must not imagine that integration of the shadow is a neat clinical task like repairing a broken machine. It is more akin to descending into the labyrinth, guided by only a faint thread. While monsters lurk in the corridors of your own soul, to attempt it requires courage, and courage is born not of bravado but of humility. The humility to admit you do not know yourself as well as you believe. The humility to sit with what disgusts you, the humility to confess that you are both more terrible and more magnificent than you dare to imagine. Without such humility, the work becomes impossible, for the ego clings to illusions of mastery, and illusions are the very food of the collective shadow. Consider how easily illusions flourish in the digital sphere. There, one can curate a persona, carefully editing out weakness, doubt, or contradiction, presenting only the fragments that garner admiration. But every fragment excluded does not vanish. It joins the growing shadow. Each curated smile conceals the pain unspoken. Each polished success hides the failure denied. Each declaration of certainty suppresses the trembling of doubt. Thus, the network becomes not a gallery of truth, but a theater of repression. And repression always breeds shadow. If you wish to see the hidden, look not at the post, but at its absence, not at what is shared, but at what is concealed. In this way, you begin to see through the illusion and into the depths beneath. And yet I do not say to abandon entirely these masks. The persona is necessary. Society cannot function without it. The danger lies not in having a mask, but in forgetting it is a mask. When you identify wholly with the persona, when you confuse the curated self for the true self, then you are ensnared. Social media seduces you into such identification, rewarding the mask with likes, punishing authenticity with scorn. This is why the path of individuation must resist the gravity of the crowd. Individuation is not rebellion for its own sake. It is fidelity to the self. Even when the self contradicts the demands of the collective. I once wrote that the world will ask you who you are, and if you do not know, the world will tell you, never has this been more urgent. The digital world tells you who you are every moment, assigning identities, categories, labels, reducing your complexity to data points. If you do not know yourself, you will be enslaved by these definitions. But if you have confronted the shadow, if you have glimpsed the self, you will not be deceived. You will know that you are more than your mask, more than your image, more than your statistics. You are a mystery, and no algorithm can measure mystery. Let me remind you that the self is not merely psychological, it is numinous. It is the archetype of wholeness, the image of God within, the spark of eternity that unites opposites. To encounter the self is to tremble before something greater than the ego, greater even than the collective. It is to realize that your life is not an accident, that you are a vessel for a cosmic drama, that your suffering and joy alike are woven into a pattern beyond comprehension. This is why individuation is sacred work. It is not therapy in the narrow sense. It is initiation into mystery, and this initiation becomes more necessary the more the collective shadow swells, for only those rooted in the self will withstand its storms. Imagine, if you will, a dream of standing in the marketplace where countless voices shout, each demanding attention, each promising truth. You wonder, overwhelmed, until suddenly a voice from within whispers a single word that quiets all others. That word does not come from the crowd. It comes from the self. The task of your life is to recognize it, to trust it, to follow it, even when all other voices mock you. The network will tempt you with noise, but the self offers silence filled with meaning. Which will you choose? The shadow is not conquered by suppression, nor by moralizing, nor by denial. It is transformed by relationship. When you turn toward it, acknowledge it, engage it, you begin to redeem it. Rage becomes courage. Envy becomes aspiration. Lust becomes vitality. Fear becomes wisdom. But when denied, these same forces twist into poison. This is the alchemy of the psyche, the transmutation of darkness into light. The alchemists sought gold, but the true gold is wholeness. And you, in confronting the shadow magnified by the digital age, are called to be alchemists of the soul. Do not be deceived into thinking this is a purely personal matter. The collective depends on the individual. Each soul that integrates the shadow reduces the intensity of the collective storm. Each act of consciousness lessens the grip of possession. When you choose to face yourself, you do not heal only yourself. You participate in the healing of the world. This is why I tell you, the future is not decided by governments alone, nor by corporations, nor by algorithms. It is decided by the courage of individuals to confront their own darkness. If enough do so, the collective shadow loses its tyranny. If too few do so, the shadow will rule unopposed. The responsibility is immense, but it is also sacred. Perhaps you feel overwhelmed, Perhaps you think, I am only one person. How can my inner work matter against the vast machinery of the collective? But you misunderstand the nature of psyche. The psyche is not bound by material measures. A single act of consciousness radiates beyond the individual like a spark that ignites unseen fields. Dreams cross boundaries. Archetypes bind humanity. Synchronicities weave destinies together. When you integrate a fragment of your shadow, you shift the balance of the collective unconscious in ways invisible but real. This is no metaphor, it is psychological fact. The unconscious is shared, and what you bring to awareness enriches the whole. The time is short, yet the opportunity is immense. Never before has humanity been forced to face its shadow so directly. Never before has repression been so impossible. For every hidden impulse finds expression online. This is terrifying, but it is also hopeful, for what is exposed can be integrated, and what is integrated can be redeemed. The danger is that humanity will refuse this work, will drown, instead in denial, scapegoating, hysteria. But the possibility remains that humanity may awaken, may learn to see itself in its own darkness, may choose wholeness over destruction. This possibility depends on you, on whether you will heed the warning. And so I say, do not flee the shadow, but do not surrender to it either. Hold it, contain it, study it, speak with it as you would with a difficult companion. Ask what it wants, what it fears, what it seeks to teach. You may be surprised by the answer, for the shadow often guards treasures. The ego has rejected. Within the darkness lies vitality, creativity, authenticity. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim these treasures and to live more fully. To reject the shadow is to live half a life. Enslaved by compulsions you cannot name, choose fullness, choose wholeness, choose the self. The hour has come when I must speak to you with utmost clarity, for the shadow that looms over humanity is no longer subtle. It is visible, loud, insistent, and it speaks through the very screens you carry in your hands. Do not think of this warning as mere philosophy. It is the lived reality of your age. Every day you awaken and place your soul at the mercy of the collective, scrolling through fragments of lives, arguments, confessions, and lies, and all the while you believe yourself an observer, when in truth you are a participant in a great psychic drama. The collective shadow has woven its net around you, and unless you awaken, you will mistake its voices for your own. But awakening does not mean destruction. It means differentiation. It means learning to discern what belongs to you and what does not, what arises from the self and what is merely the projection of the crowd. This discernment is the essence of individuation. In former times, individuation was a path walked by the few, the mystics, the seekers, those who withdrew from society to discover the inner kingdom. Now the path is demanded of all, for no one can escape the flood of the collective shadow. You cannot seal yourself away in silence forever. The network will reach you in some form. Therefore, the task is not withdrawal alone, but integration, living amid the noise while rooted in the silence of the self. I tell you, the danger is not that the world is filled with lies. The world has always been filled with lies. The danger is that you will no longer believe truth exists. The collective shadow, amplified by the trickster, teaches you to doubt everything until doubt itself becomes your God. This is nihilism, the abyss into which cultures fall when they can no longer sustain meaning, and once in the abyss, they grasp at tyrants, at ideologies, at anything that promises certainty. Already you see this pattern repeating. Already you feel the pull of voices that offer simplistic answers to complex problems. Beware. These are not saviors, but embodiments of the shadow, demanding your submission. If you do not anchor yourself in the self, you will follow them willingly, convinced you are free while bound in invisible chains. Yet I will not leave you with despair, for the shadow is not only danger, it is also opportunity. Within the darkness lies the possibility of transformation. The shadow contains the very material of your growth, the hidden fire of your creativity, the raw energy of your unlived life. When you face it, when you integrate it, you reclaim your vitality, and when enough individuals do this, the collective shadow itself begins to shift. Imagine if outrage were transformed into courage, envy into aspiration, hatred into discernment. The same energy that now destroys could become the energy that heals. This is not a dream, it is the alchemy of the soul, available to every one of you. How, then, do you live consciously in an age of digital illusions? Begin with small acts. Do not offer your soul cheaply. Before you post, ask yourself, what part of me speaks here? Is it my mask, my wound, my shadow, or myself? Before you judge another online, ask, what of myself do I project into this judgment? Before you surrender hours to scrolling, ask, what am I avoiding in my own depths? These questions are not meant to shame you, but to awaken you. For each conscious question weakens the hold of possession. Each act of reflection is a crack in the armor of the shadow. Attend to your dreams, for they remain the royal road to the unconscious. The collective shadow may roar in the day, but in the night your soul still speaks in symbols. Write down your dreams, reflect upon their images, share them with those who understand. In dreams you may find warnings, but also guidance, symbols of wholeness, glimpses of the self. Do not neglect them, for in neglecting them, you neglect your own salvation. Dreams are more real than the illusions of the feed, for they arise not from manipulation, but from the eternal depths of your being. Seek community, but not the false community of clicks and numbers. Seek souls who are willing to speak truth, to confront their shadows, to walk the path of individuation. Together, you can create sanctuaries of consciousness amid the storm. Do not underestimate the healing power of a single circle of awakened individuals. Such circles radiate influence beyond what you can measure, counterbalancing the chaos of the collective shadow. In this way, you live not only for yourself, but for humanity. Above all, remember the sacred. The network strips life of its mystery, reducing everything to information, entertainment, transaction. But you are not made of data, you are made of soul. To live without reverence is to suffocate. Find symbols, rituals, practices that connect you to the eternal. Light a candle. Walk in silence beneath the stars. Read sacred texts, not as dogma, but as archetypal maps. Create art that speaks to the depths. In these acts, you resist the flattening of the soul. You remind yourself that beyond the collective shadow there is light. Beyond the mask there is the self. Beyond the noise there is meaning. I must speak now with finality. Humanity stands at a threshold. On one side lies unconsciousness, possession, destruction. On the other lies awakening, wholeness, renewal. The collective shadow will not vanish. It is eternal. But you may choose whether it enslaves you or teaches you. If you refuse the lesson, catastrophe will come. For history shows us the price of ignoring the shadow. If you embrace the lesson, transformation will come, and a new chapter of consciousness may dawn. The choice is urgent, for the pace of the world accelerates beyond measure, yet the choice is also timeless, for it has always been the choice to remain in darkness or to seek the light within. And so I leave you with this: do not fear the shadow, but do not take it lightly. Approach it as you would a powerful God, reverently, cautiously, humbly. Do not seek to destroy it, for in destroying it, you destroy part of yourself. Seek instead to know it, to integrate it, to make it a servant of the self. Then you will stand not as a victim of the collective, but as a whole human being, radiating consciousness into a world desperate for light. This is the path of individuation. This is the warning and the invitation. The shadow is here. The self calls. Which voice will you follow?